Well, it is about a month away from the release of Season 4, and we get to test this stuff on the PTR. It was announced today, and we'll be able to access the PTR tomorrow, November 9th, hopefully sometime in the morning when it's up. And there's a lot of stuff that's coming with this PTR to test, so let's take a look at it here. We'll get to see the Glacial Tar Mutated Expedition. We get to test all 8 of the new Season 4 artifacts, and then we've got some new rewards and narrative for Season 4 as well. There are some massive balance changes coming with this patch, and they are crazy exciting for Buildcraft. I'm really looking forward to getting on the PTR to see some of these, and we'll talk about this in just a moment when we get to the balance section. And then we get to test out the Winter Convergence Festival, the Legacy of Crassus, as well as some inventory improvements. If you guys want to check out the full patch notes yourself, I have a link to them down in the description for you too. As always with a new patch, there are a ton of bug fixes. So if there are big ones that impact gameplay, I will make sure to mention them for you guys. But the first thing I want to start with here is the changes to navigation. You now move at the same speed in all directions when not sprinting. This is pretty significant for anyone who is backing up. But the big one I want to talk about here is increase the maximum non-sprint movement speed to 4 meters per second. Now, to my understanding, the current non-sprint move speed is 3 meters per second. And this is huge for combat simply because if you get hit by a melee attack, depending on your armor weight, you are not able to sprint and you are lowered to that 3 meter per second movement speed. So with this new patch, when you eat that melee attack, from what I see here, you will not be slowed as much as you are currently on live. So this is a big change just to melee combat in general, and I'm curious how this will play out. And finally, they improved the player's animation when entering sprints from backward dodges. Now, I haven't got to test this because I haven't been on the PTR, but I do know on the live server that there are times when you're rolling out of a dodge and going into sprint that your character does a little bit of a stutter and doesn't move right away. So hopefully this helps fix up that issue that I see, at least in my gameplay here. Moving on, acid damage is now one of the elemental damage types, so it can be mitigated by armor, so a big change to that type of damage. They've updated it so you can now hold block/aim while a weapon is seathed, and it will pull your weapon out or trigger the block. So this is nice just for kind of the flow of combat, getting in and out of combat. They updated heavy attack buffer windows to make triggering back-to-back heavy attacks more consistent. I'll have to get on the PTR to see exactly what this is going to change. And then they added functionality that will reduce block stamina damage taken for a short duration after blocking an attack to help scale stamina damage in large group fights. So this is really huge for things like any block tanks in larger scale fights, because they are going to be able to hold block a lot longer now against all those opponents. They reduced the player's block break reaction duration from 30 frames to 15 frames, so if you do get block broken, you will recover from it quicker now. And then they made some adjustments to the block stability of different weapons. Weapons with lower base block stability have been slightly increased. Weapons with higher base stamina damage have had their base stamina damage reduced. And the attacks whose stamina damage coefficients were much higher than average have been reduced. So I think this is going to affect weapons like Greatsword, Great Axe, and Warhammer. And they unified stamina damage coefficients across all melee weapon heavy attacks. Consumables, they removed the ability to use consumables from your inventory during combat. You can still use them while on the quick slots, so a bit of a change there. But the big one, they removed the consumable heal mod adjustment for PvP, so consumables will now heal at their normal amount in PvP. So this is going to be a buff to potion healing in PvP across the board. And then for some artifact changes, they have fixed the Odo so that it will properly give you that damage bonus when you hit a stunned opponent on either weapon. And they have removed strike damage from the Inferno Fire Staff and the Life Taker Void Gauntlet. They will both deal their default damage type of fire or void. But they left Abyss, I think, as void damage. So this is a huge change to these two weapons, which were a lot less popular than the Abyss. But there's something else that is massive that we'll talk about in a sec here. They're also changing the Ankh so that it will now decrease life-stealing healing given as well. So it looks like the Ankh is being turned into a you need a pocket healer in order for this to be a great artifact for you kind of item. And then the Blood Drinker, they added a 5% bonus to all the life-stealing healing while the effect is active. And then let's talk about gems. This is the biggest changes, I think, coming this patch. And if they work the way I think they do, every single build in the game is viable now. Yeah, let's start with the Onyx Gem. They have reduced the health requirement to get that bonus damage from 100% to 70%. And they reduced the maximum effect range from 30% bonus damage to 18% bonus damage, since it will have a higher uptime. Something similar happened to the Emerald as well. They increased the health target requirement threshold from 30% to 50% health, and then the damage has been reduced down to 15 or 16% additional damage. And they added a 1 to 5% bonus healing scaling with the Emerald as well, so that might be a great gem for a healer now. And then the Opal, they call by far the most used gem, has been nerfed from 15% bonus damage to 12% bonus damage. And last but not least, the Sapphire, the empowered gem, is now updated to scale off of focus instead of intelligence. So I know that the flail is an arcane weapon and that scales off of focus, so that might be why they went this route here, just to kind of normalize those values. But here's the big one, guys. Conversion gem balance. Updated functionality and values of all conversion gems. Conversion gems will now consistently convert 50% of weapon damage to the associated elemental gem type, regardless of the tier. But now they scale all of the weapon's damage into intelligence or focus based on which gem you put on there. So when we take a look at these scaling values, this is where it gets very interesting. It says at the top, for reference, single attribute scaling is 100%, primary scaling for a weapon is 90%, secondary scaling is 65%, and if a weapon dual scales, kind of like the greatsword, it has 80% scaling. So that's just to give us a reference of where we're going to be sitting at with these gems now. So we're going to start off with the tier 5 gem because this gives you the most scaling, 50% conversion to an element at 90% scaling off of intelligence or 80% scaling off of focus. So what I'm understanding here is that you can put, for example, let's say a ruby for the fire scaling on any weapon in the game, and it will now scale 90% off of intelligence. Meaning that you can play an intelligence build and use any weapon combo that you want. You can play a focus build and use a life staff with any weapon combo that you want, as long as you put the right elemental gem on your off weapon. Yeah, this is massive. I don't have to say anything past that. You guys know what this means for Buildcraft. Every build is now viable, and it is going to be crazy to see what people come up with and what kind of combos people are running. Especially the life staff players getting so many more options than they had before as an offensive option. So correct me if I'm wrong if this is not how this is going to work, but from what I understand, this is going to be crazy. Now, something to remember is that the lower tier gems will still give you the 50% conversion to the element type, but you will only get 60% scaling, 50% on focus for the tier 2, and then slightly more going up. Rune Glass variants will still scale at tier 4 scaling values, so you'll get 80% scaling to intelligence and 70% scaling to focus on the tier 4 Rune Glass. So I'm curious to see whether the tier 4 Rune Glass or the T5 gem will be performing better when you take a weapon and scale it to intel or focus that it wouldn't normally scale to. And then for the weapon changes, mostly just a bunch of fixes to stuff that wasn't working properly. And then Spear, they reduced the cooldown from Javelin's Refreshing Precision upgrade from 50% to 25%. Lifestealing had a bit of a nerf to Sacred Ground. The Anointed Heal mod does not affect consumables or lifestealing healing anymore. And the Life Staff Sacred Protection passive will also not affect consumables or lifestealing, but its value has been buffed from 5% to 10%. For a few non-combat changes, the Azoth cap has been raised to 2,500 from 1,000. The odds of receiving artifacts in the reward track has been increased for rank 200 or higher, and this is kind of a big deal because as you get to rank 200, you get a whole bunch of stuff that you could potentially roll from your reward track. So they're just making it, I guess, more likely or as likely to get the artifact as if you didn't have the 200 plus rank. The Endless Thirst artifact has been added to the loot table for the final boss in the mutated Savage Divide, and the Tumbler Feet Wraps will now drop from OPR caches for anybody who missed these two items or might miss these two items coming into Season 4. Outpost Rush crates will now be loot biased. This is massive because I do a lot of OPR, so that's going to get me a lot of nice stuff. And then the 65 Outpost Rush reward caches will now also roll on a slightly improved gear score range for players. Hopefully we can roll that 700 gear score stuff. War and OPR will now give a max of 5,500 PvP XP and 4,000 Azoth Salt. So a huge buff to the amount of PvP XP you get from OPR. You will also now get 20 Dark Matter for the maximum contribution in OPR. And 3v3 arenas have actually been nerfed to give a max reward of 1,200 XP and 500 Azoth Salt. Influence race reward caches now roll items with significantly improved gear score range, and they are in line with PvP content for max level players. That's nice because the cache has never dropped anything nice for me, and you will also get 10 dark matter as a max level player from the cache as well. You should expect to get slightly better loot from your aptitude crates for your different crafting skills now as well. And they've added the ability to craft research projects. These projects are designed to consume some of those extra recipes, patterns, and music sheets that you have lying around, and will grant you bonus XP in their corresponding trade skill. You know, for most players, I don't know how useful this is, but for me, man, I play an Iron Man, and I have a bank full of recipes. So this is going to have a big impact on my ability to gain XP in those skills. Heart runes have now been made generally cheaper to upgrade. So if you're waiting to upgrade a 700 gear score heart rune, I would wait until after the patch to do it. Prismatic scarabs will now have their own categories for mining, skinning, harvesting, and logging tools. So that's kind of nice. And the Arcana trade skill that used to make a jewelry matrix will now make an armor matrix. They temporarily adjusted the drop amounts for mithril ore. You should get more ore from each individual one that you mine, and they will be placing more ores in the future, so I'm assuming that the drop amounts will go back to normal once they add more of those. And players now have the ability to prospect silver, gold, and platinum ore to create caches of gems. The better the ore, the higher tier of gem that you can get. And that is about it. There's a few more changes here, but they're mostly just little fixes. Those are all the big things that are coming this patch, especially the big combat changes. I would love to hear what you guys think. I am really excited to test this one tomorrow, so look forward to a fresh new video from me very soon on the PTR. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. If you want to check out builds for me, you can find them on my website, pvpnewworld.com. If you have an awesome clip that you want to see in the New World Top 5, you can send that to Kristofer at pvpnewworld.com. Best of luck to you guys. And if you want to catch a live stream or two from me, there's a link to my Twitch down below for you too. A big thank you to our sponsor, ExpressVPN. They can help keep you safe on the internet, and you guys can get a deal with them thanks to the link down below. And of course, a huge thank you to all of my patrons on Patreon. Thank you guys so much for supporting the show, for being a part of this, for keeping it going. I appreciate it very much, and yeah, I'm looking forward to putting out some more in the future, especially with these spicy patch notes. Thank you guys again for watching. Hope to see y'all next time. Have a good night, everybody.